Then after our 15 minutes or so presentation, we can go into specific questions on the different components. So we're here for the Hollister Avenue State Street Improvements Plan. Here's sort of outline of what we're going to talk about today. So where did this project come from? What was the project history in the various planning documents? Why is it 4 lanes, and what does LOS actually mean? What has changed since the 2013 project study report? What could these improvements look like in the community? And then how do I get involved, and what is the tentative schedule for this project? So we can sort of begin going back to the 1995 Goleta Transportation Improvement Plan, or the GTIP. Now, it's important context for this is before the city of Goleta incorporated, so this laid out important policies for guiding the capital improvements for transportation infrastructure within this area of the county. This is when the Hollister Avenue project was first introduced as a capacity improvement project, and the plan even cites issues with roadway volumes exceeding the design capacity. So this is when the project was first listed as a priority for funding. The next major milestone was the project study report produced by Public Works to analyze, in addition to the 4 lanes we've been hearing, alternatives including roundabout control, the intersections of Road Allen and Road, as well as what level of service would be with 1 lane. And Walter and Gary will go into more details on the project study report, as well as the public outreach efforts that were incorporated into that. So in 2013, the Board of Supervisors approved the project study report. Specifically, they motioned to file and accept the staff recommendations for the 4 lanes and the project study report, as well as authorized the Public Works Director to go proceed with the 4 lanes with the signalized intersection option. And that means also entering the environmental review phase. The last major milestone was the adoption of the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan in 2015. There are several policies in the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan that reference the Hollister State Street corridor, and here are just some of the policies and language contained in that document. They discuss interagency coordination with replacement of the railroad bridge, making that an important priority. The designation of a mixed-use zoning district sort of ties in our multimodal and streetscape components for creating a more vibrant, attractive, safe corridor. Determinations of standards of level of service, so that, in summary, the whole community plan area should operate at a level of service C. So that's where the keyword shall, the LOSC shall be maintained. However, we may consider LOSD for Hollister State Street only. And Walter and Gary will go into more detail on that component. Finally, the plan has specific actions regarding creating multimodal streetscape capacity improvements for the Hollister State Street corridor. I'll now pass it on to Walter to discuss the next point, why 4 lanes.
So I can get to the why the 4 lanes in a couple slides, but I just want to start off. This first slide just to show the project limits. I think probably a lot of you might have did, like you said, brief. Is the project starts on the west side at San Antonio Road, that's near the baseball field. It continues up Hollister Avenue, past Modoc, at the middle of the crossing it becomes State Street, and the project continues all the way to about State Route 154. The project in total is about 1.25 miles long. So just some of our history with Coast. We came into Coast, just similar to this meeting here, back in November of 2012. At that time, we were looking at 2 different alternatives for the roadway. We presented those alternatives. We then entertained questions and comments. We had another meeting in December of 2012 on the field with FEMA and Ed French from the Bike Coalition, I believe. We met at the Java Hut. We met near the Hollister Modoc intersection, talked about some of the concerns from the bike community, and we took those thoughts and started dialogue with Coast and you. It was a good meeting. We again came to Coast in June of 2015 just to provide an update on the project. And the good thing about these meetings that we've had with Coast is it provides an opportunity to give an update and to get feedback on the project. Next slide, please. So what are some of the improvements since August of 2013? And there's two bullets that aren't listed on here, but I want to go over them because I think they came from comments that we received from Coast, or at least the alternative transportation community, and they're not on here. One, there was a discussion that we wanted to see a sidewalk, or a need for a sidewalk or some walking path underneath the railroad bridge on the south side of the roadway. Matt was great on that. He found a grant to do that, and he said, why wait for the project to incorporate that? Why don't we do it now? We took that, we found the money, we did the project. That was a good one. We've also been talking internally of what improvements can we do now to improve some of the decision-making points for bicyclists and alternative transportation. So what the direction we're moving towards is we've come up with an interim striping plan. The next time the project is paved at the intersection, we'll probably do some paving improvements to help the bicyclists. And we'll be looking for Matt's input on that, who works with you guys to get some input. And that's actually written in the PSR, so we'll be implementing that. So some of the bullets that are on here. A comment that we've been hearing a lot from the bike community is, why is it so wide? Why are we using 12-foot lanes? Well, since when we did the project study report, we had 12-foot lanes and 5.5-foot bike lanes. What we've done since that time is we've reduced, and it's hard to see on here, but the lanes have been reduced to 11 foot. And we took that 2 additional feet and we added bike buffers up next to the bicycle lane. So we've heard your comments and we've incorporated that into the project. The last bullet, it didn't come from Coast, but it's an improvement that we've made. What we did from between about the fire station to the Creekside area is the road's been shifted slightly to the north. You guys probably won't even notice it. The reason that was done is we're trying to reduce the right-of-way impact on the property owners who are on the south side. And it'll also help us with conforming the driveways with the elevation. So that didn't come from Coast, but it's another improvement that has come from other people's comments. Next slide, please. Similar, this is the State Street segment, same thing. We reduced the lanes to 11 foot and added those 2 additional feet, added the bike buffer on both sides of the roadway. Next slide. Why 4 lanes? This has been a question we've been asked a lot. We're going to attack this slide in 3 different phases. I'm just going to provide you the numbers. This is the data that we did some studies back in 2011. I'm just going to talk about the numbers. We're going to follow up with having Gary talk about what does level of service mean and what does design capacity mean. And he'll also talk about what his thoughts are on some of the numbers that came out of that data. And then Matt will follow Gary and talk about where are these 2035 numbers coming from? Where is this projected volume going to come from? So we're just going to focus on, actually, if you just go back to one table. I just want to focus on the top one right now. And there's a lot of data on here, but I'll try to go step by step. When we did our analysis, we broke the entire corridor into 3 segments. One, from San Antonio to Nogales. The second segment was from Nogales to Modoc. And then we looked from Modoc to State Route 154. And this is just data obtained by, we put counters out on the roadway, we determined average, ADT is average daily traffic. What this shows is that San Antonio to Modoc, actually between San Antonio and Modoc and Nogales to Modoc, it was somewhere around 18,000. And then the State Street segment was 13,000. Now I'm going to actually refer to these as segment 1, 2, and 3, just kind of to make it a little easier. So the current county level service threshold for this type of roadway is a level service fee threshold is 14,300. Okay, and again, Gary will talk about what these numbers mean. The design capacity is 17,900, around 18,000. So in the current configuration, what the data is showing is that the first segment was over the level service fee threshold, and it was over design capacity already in 2011. That's what the data showed. The second segment, down MODOC, was over the level service fee threshold, but below the design capacity. Not by much, but it was under. And then State Street was under both in 2011. Okay, next slide. This next slide will discuss why are we looking at 4 lanes. We're not going to focus on the next 2 columns. We're just going to focus on these volumes right here. This is 2035. If we project out 20 years, this shows that the volumes on the first segment are projected to be 26,000. The second segment around 24,000, and then the State Street segment somewhere around 19. This is looking out to 2035. This shows why we're looking at 4 lanes. And Gary will talk about this. Design capacity is that's the road is breaking down. It's level service F. Okay. Is showing that these projected volumes not only surpass level service C, they actually are surpassing the design capacity of the roadway for a single lane. Okay? For a 4-lane roadway, it's under the capacity. And the question might be, well, why is it so much greater? The capacity is almost double. Because we can't design a lane and a half. It's either a single lane can handle the volume, or 2 lanes handles the volume. We can't do a lane and a half. It doesn't work. So with that, I'm going to pass on to Gary. He's going to talk a little bit about what level service C means, what design capacity means, and talk a little bit about the numbers.
I'm Gary Smart, County Traffic Engineer for those who just came in. We had a meeting just a month ago with the residents out at the Hollister MODOC area at the elementary school. He was there, and I'm not sure who else attended. Anybody there? Yeah. But one of the questions that seemed to come up is, what are these numbers? What is level of service? Why do we have to expand out to that? What's the downside? And so we added this slide to the presentation that we run it through, see how you guys take it and see what improvements we can do with the slides. But anyways, level of service is a method of measuring the performance or operation of the roadway. We grade the level of service just like a school grades, A, B, C, D. We have E in there, then F is failing. A, B, C is all pretty much free flow, unobstructed. You're traveling pretty much how you want to travel down the roadway at the speed you want to go as far as vehicles. To get through the corridor there from like the fire station over to the off-ramp, 101 off-ramp, takes about 2 minutes. As the volumes increase, the speeds kind of go down, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And your travel time increases for the traffic going through there. And we get to level service C threshold, which is the county adopted threshold C, 14,300. Then you start getting into a little bit, you can see the curve for the travel time and the speed start dipping down pretty good. And you head down to the design capacity, which is kind of where you're going to level service F. So the way the county community plan was written, we were supposed to have level service C at this intersection. We can dip down, or at MODOC, we can look at level of service D for short periods of time, but we can't go further than D into the F range, is where things get pretty bad. Things kind of fall apart. It's unstable travel, what we call unstable, and the capacity actually drops because of the load of traffic. Travel times go up, and you'd be looking at times where we have the freeway problems on the freeway, and people are trying to use Hollister long period to get from fire station, 10, 15 minutes to travel down through there. I think that's that. And then I just wanted to back up to what Walter was saying about improvements we've done. When we have these surface treatments, this is kind of going off on a tangent. When we have surface treatments, it gives us the opportunity to change the striping. And last year we had a surface treatment on the east end of State Street, where we extended the bike lane all the way to the city limit, and then also added a buffer through a lot of that area down to where the surface treatment ended. Was another improvement. We didn't wait for the project, but we moved forward with. And then when we have other surface treatments, it gives us the opportunity. So we're looking for a opportunity at Modoc and Nogales, that section there, to add some bike lane facilities to that section, which we now draw the bike lane after Nogales and or in between Nogales and Modoc.
So my name is Matt Dalmartine, County Public Works. When the 4-lane project started to go under development, one of the things that you do for any roadway project is start to study the traffic volumes. And you're taking a good hard look at what's there today, and you're using your best methodologies to forecast future traffic based on a very thorough study of what future development could occur under the surrounding jurisdiction's general plans. So you go in and look at your own general plan. What is the county anticipating for future residential and commercial development? And you can drive around the eastern Goleta Valley, you can look at vacant parcels, you can see there's not a ton, but it's a fairly developed community, but there are hundreds of residential units, there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of square feet of commercial that can still be built in that area. Is it going to happen tomorrow? Nope. But over the next couple of decades, that's what we have to look at. Then you look at the city of Santa Barbara, same thing. What sort of adjacent build-outs can you anticipate under their general plan? Then you also have the Santa Barbara Airport, which has industrial land that is either underutilized or underdeveloped. And then you have the city of Goleta. So for example, right now, either under construction or breaking ground this year, the city of Goleta has 700 residential units under construction. That's not including hotels, that's not including the additional commercial space that's being built along the Hollister corridor. And so we have to look at that, and as I went into this fairly skeptical, frankly, about where is all this traffic coming from, and is the modeling actually accurate? I got on the horn with the traffic modelers, I really did a deep dive on the model, and I started to tease out there are this remaining development in all of these jurisdictions that combines to new traffic. And so you're looking at 6,000-7,000 average daily trips. That in itself isn't a lot. And when you look at numbers like 25,000 average daily trips, that doesn't surprise me, because right now, today, in say, for example, Goleta Old Town, Hollister's carrying 30,000 trips a day. So to see that kind of come down to this end, after again, I tried to kind of get into this, didn't surprise me. Then you think about, well, if it's not Hollister, where else do we go? What's a regional route that you could build that is parallel to the 101 that could connect the entire South Coast, that could connect the Goleta Valley? We looked at Cali Real, and the problem with that one is in order to bridge the area around Patterson Avenue, about 7 years ago, the price tag was coming in at about $25 million. I think with inflation, call it close to $30 million today, just for that bridge, and for a roadway that has a far more insignificant regional role than Hollister. So the county made the decision, just from sort of a fiscal policy, and that the money just isn't there to be able to do improvements in Cali Real. So Hollister is a regional facility, and it needs to provide some backup to what's happening on 101. I think some of us can remember, I think about a year and a half ago, when I-5 closed down. There's some pretty famous shots in the Independent of all the truck traffic coming down 101, and the locals said, of course, the heck of that, we're going to get on Hollister, and that jammed. So when these things happen, and they're going to continue to happen in the future, they're not going to happen every day, but when they do, you have to have some backup in your transportation system. So I think our challenge then is there's this balance that we're all going to be exploring as we're developing the design for this, and going into the environmental impact report, is you've got a balance for a need for a regional facility. You have the balance for the need to get the design right so that the context is correct within the businesses and the neighborhoods that this facility is going into. And then there's got to be a balance because you've got all these different modes of transportation. So although it's a roadway widening, it's a transportation project. And so there's elements to it that when you look up and down the corridor, the sidewalk system is a mess. And one of the things that this project really aims to do is complete the sidewalk system so that it's possible for people to make their way up and down the corridor on continuous, all-weather, accessible from an ADA standpoint sidewalks, that they're balanced with bike paths, that there's accommodations for MTD and the buses getting in and out. That's our challenge, is to balance all of those elements as we go forward with this project.
Are we ready for questions? Is this presentation done? Or
I had a couple more slides on this. Yeah.
Okay, can you hold it?
So going down our list, so we have just 2 more points. Second to the last one is what could these improvements look like? And touching on what Matt is saying, we are trying to balance these what may seem like conflicting objectives with having 4 lanes of capacity. This is how the streetscape component comes in with elements such as landscaping, lighting. That was our intent at the first open house to get input on these features and where they could be located throughout the corridor. And these are just some of the features that are reflected within our draft streetscape plan. And then we have the plan in the middle. So after this presentation, we can go into questions and informal dialogue about elements of the streetscape component as well as the 4 lanes. Last step, how do I get involved? What's sort of the next steps? People have been asking me what the schedule is, and I appreciate your patience, and this is sort of an evolving process. So I'm going to split it up into what our near-term goals are and then our long-term. So our near-term schedule is, first we're going to have continual dialogue with interested parties such as yourself. In fact, this afternoon we're meeting with some people from the Hope Annex, Hope Branch Annex, to go over some of their input and questions. Our next event will be the South Board of Architectural Review on July 7th. I wanted to sort of introduce what this board, the purpose of this board is they're composed, if you don't know already, of architectural and landscape architecture design professionals, and they do not have any jurisdiction over this project per se, as they would as a developer going before the minute hearing. We are here on an advisory capacity. We want to get their input to really well vet our design to make sure that what we're doing is practical and makes sense. So it's just another layer of rigor to the design process. So they have a limited capacity to accept public comment, but you're welcome to attend to hear and stay updated on the project. Oh, sorry. After that, we have our second open house. I'm just going to say tentatively that's in the summer after our July 7th SBAR hearing. And then the last item for our near-term schedule will be the third and final SBAR review to go over, once again, the edits we've incorporated from A, B, and C. So as you can see, it's a sort of fluid process where we're incorporating comments from both the public and this SBAR to get a final preliminary streetscape plan. Now, long-term schedule, this project we want to now couch this project as one single county project. It's not the public works, widening, and then the streetscape. They are tied together, and they will be also analyzing one environmental review document as part of the California Environmental Quality Act process, as well as the federal National Environmental Policy Act. There's actually 2 environmental documents that we can discuss. If you have further questions on the environmental review process, we can go over that later after this presentation. But here's sort of the rough schedule. So back in 2014, there was a This is following state and federal law. There was a notice of preparation and a public scoping meeting to sort of set the premise and the work. What questions and what level of detail are you going to be doing the environmental analysis? And the consultants have already begun work starting in October 2014. And that was an opportunity for the public to comment. The next step is the county will prepare a draft, admin draft EIR, or Environmental Impact Report, as well as an environmental assessment, and distribute it to its agencies to internally comment on and receive feedback. And then shortly thereafter, prepare a public draft review after the county has internally vetted that document, which will be a 45-day minimum review comment period, and that is again another major milestone in which the public can comment on the project as a whole. And it's quickly just going down through this. It'll finally end with some sort of hearing where the county will certify and approve the EIR, and Caltrans, who's managing the federal side of the project, will approve the environmental assessment. So sort of wrapping up with contact and info, I will be the sole contact for this project just to make things easier. So you can contact me by email or by phone, and then I will distribute the questions and get the answers to you from the rest of the staff. Some short-term efforts we're doing right now is we're overhauling our website to facilitate better communication and make that easier to read and more user-friendly. And a part of that is a fact sheet and frequently asked questions page. So this is what's coming down the pipeline very soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know the road was several times. I lived on the ground, so I'm familiar with it. And in those days, people weren't thinking so much about how to accommodate the cars that would result from new development in the area. People were thinking more in terms of how do we reduce cars and alternate means of transportation. One of the things that we talked about then, and I suppose it was a pipe dream, but was a train, a surface train down the middle of Hollister. I suppose that's not going to happen. It's certainly not going to happen if planners are only thinking in the past. Planners are only assuming that the models that were based on what happened in the past, like X number of cars for such and such a building, one number of cars per unit of housing or something like that. Those don't necessarily hold anymore, and yet the models don't reflect them. So, for instance, for the first time in California history, the number of 18-year-olds applying for driver's licenses has decreased. Is that reflected in the projections for the future? Probably not. As long as you guys keep trying to widen the roads and absorb more traffic, as long as you don't see that there's a change taking place in this country, that I won't live to see the outcome, but you will. And you'll find that, I think, that your 4-lane roads in a place like Hollister will certainly be the one up. You won't get the kind of traffic that you're projecting. And meanwhile, you'll have severely impacted people working there.
Just to touch on that a little bit with where modeling sometimes is accurate, where it isn't, because I totally hear you. There's probably jurisdictions who have tried to predict with greater accuracy what's happening in the future, and it's difficult. I go back to the 101 widening project, and that was one where in the 90s, Caltrans did a couple things. They offered, I thought, a poorly presented project in terms of the aesthetics and the renderings that they did of the project. And they did their best to describe traffic that had not arrived yet in the South Coast. And so it's based on future projections, on future congestion that hadn't happened yet. So back in the early 90s, on a bad day, which would occur on occasion, typically a holiday weekend, there would be a backup on San Juan. And now, on ordinary Fridays, on ordinary days, on ordinary Sundays, there is constant congestion that was predicted.
The pedestrian bicycle bridge over the freeway. We didn't get that to Caltrans to build it while we could get it cheaper. It was never going to happen. And every time anyone goes by there, they're thinking, what was county transportation thinking? Because county planning did not, as you remember, endorse that. That's one thing on the plan. The other thing on the plan was a presentation that we had in this room just a couple of months ago from our friend, passionate visionary Peter Brown. And he talked about the advent of driverless and smart cars coming so fast that what was unthinkable when Caltrans presented its thing is now likely to be all over California and the western states within the next 10 to 20 years. And when you're looking at what that will do to lane capacity and safe mobility of motorized vehicles, both trucks and cars, the capacity numbers that you're doing, which are the current numbers right out of the ITE manual, and I salute you for that. If what Dave has suggested comes true, and when you read in the Wall Street Journal or you read in the Asheville magazine, it's coming really fast. Those numbers are going to turn out to be really, really high because the spacing, the safe spacing between vehicles in different lanes is going to be so different 10 or 15 years from now from what it is today, that a project that's looking out for worst case capacity and level of service 20, 25 years out is going to be shown to be, that this was one of the last dinosaur projects of the second half of the 20th century as the rest of California moves into the 21st. The third factor I would put on the assay plan is that when you're looking 20 years out at worst case planning, and I'm glad that Supervisor Wolf's associate is right here, a lot of that determines, and Alan is here from the planning department, every property owner has a right to develop something by state and federal law. But no property owner has an absolute right to develop whatever they want. And the mediation in that right is going to come when someone applies for a project and it goes through the county review process. And they're going to say, what is the zoning and the general plan designation for the East Toledo Valley? Now, the designation, the ability of the community to accommodate this project is going to be one thing if it's based on the present infrastructure. And it's going to be another thing if you build these extra lanes 10 or 15 years before they're actually needed. And it's equally possible if you go on the one track that the county is going to say, until those lanes come in, we're not going to approve everything you're asking for now. We're going to give you a phased development plan, and if in 5 years the county's begun the widening process, we come back and we'll give you more. Or if not, the answer is, here's the minimum we can approve and come back later. So I know in private conversations, I mentioned all of you individually and collectively have talked about all of these things. But the question is, I don't see them reflected in your public overview. And when you look at your alternatives under the CEQA and NEPA analysis, I imagine that there's going to be significant appendices or footnotes, which are going to have to deal, with how those affect the current need, for this project. Am I wrong in that?
Thank you, Lee.
No, but it wasn't a rhetorical question. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, is that wrong?
Just that, and I heard your question. Can you just give me the specific questions to make sure we're addressing it?
How does the community know that you're not guessing wrong about future growth patterns the way they did with the acceleration lane between southbound Storville, Los Berneros? How do we know that the plan has taken into account the advent of new technology, which is going to change how you designate level of service and safe spacing for smooth flow of traffic. And how do we know that land use decisions that are within the authority of the county and not the Public Works Department may not lead to full homes filled out in the East Toledo Valley or in the northwest part of the city of Santa Barbara within the 20 years that you're talking about?
So we'll address the first question first regarding.
No, those three different questions.
Yeah, so we'll do the first one. Do you want to talk about the vehicles? We've discussed this internally, like you said.
Vehicles, okay, so the self-driving vehicles, everything you said was pretty accurate. I really don't have anything to comment on that. The timeline that you say is accurate, probably about 20 years they're going to be coming out. They have some problems now with security and getting regulations in place that, the technology's there, they're just going to wait for these other issues to be resolved and people start buying them and everything. Once there's a lot of them on the road, we will see a difference out there. We're not sure what the difference will be, and we don't know how to forecast that. So to answer your question on that, the county is not trying to forecast it at this time, as the industry or the traffic engineering field has a method of doing it. We'll look at that. And the numbers we're looking at as far as future volume aren't just a small margin of, we're just 10% over the number or something like that. We're like 40% over the design capacity, and almost twice as much as our acceptable level of service for it. So it's not really a, hey, let's take a chance here type of number and see what happens.
The first segment, as we remember, is already there. And then the second part was the planning question. Do you want to tackle that one now?
For apartment, basically allow those to build out depending on what sort of infrastructure is there accompanying it.
I mean, it's part of the larger projects that we're likely to see along there, and we are likely to see some as part of the Eastern Toledo Valley community planning process, for example, and part of our housing element and state requirements for higher density housing. We did rezone some properties along this corridor, and we're going to see some increases in those. So as those projects come along, Lee's correct, and we do have to look at what the traffic impacts are, and that oftentimes with these types of kind of infill projects becomes one of the crucial questions that's asked. And so we've done some preliminary work with the Eastern Toledo Valley environmental impact report on that, and there are actually some mitigation measures that we've incorporated in. But again, it's something that's difficult to predict given we have zoning in place, but we don't have projects at this point to actually evaluate.
I'll just touch super briefly on the first item that you brought up, which is that northbound off-ramp. I don't know, your memory to me sometimes is just so amazing. I can't recall all of the details that you brought up, but I'm going to defer to you. But I will say this, that with all of the development that's happening around York and Hollister, and the additional development that's happening at UCSB, we know millions of square feet of new classroom space and lab space, et cetera. When I drive to Buellton for routine meetings at about 8 o'clock in the morning, passing that ramp, it's almost backing up in the main line now. And so the storage was anticipated, and apparently it was needed. So anyway,
It's like that at the PM when I got
that's all I'll say about that. Yeah, it's being used.
Yeah, it's a different project though.
It is.
Yeah, so let's stick with Hollister for the time being, I would suggest. Eve was next. Eve, the other Eve will have her turn.
So I am absolutely delighted to see your responsiveness to the group of fierce and vocal constituency, and how you, the county, really amended your plan to really focus and meet the demands of a constituency, which are the bike riders. Delighted to see that. And I do hope that you will extend that same level of meeting our demands to save our neighborhoods, because as you are well aware of I noticed on the map that all the lanes are open. That's not what happens. It's that, and as you traffic people are aware, of induced demand, that those lanes will fill. Now, but they won't fill for 20 years. In the interim, we and our neighborhoods will experience all the negative effects of having a 4-lane freeway run through the middle of our neighborhoods, of our community. And we'll experience the exact same thing as the neighborhoods, the beautiful, charming neighborhoods in East Los Angeles. Oh, that wonderful place that everybody wants to go and live now, East Los Angeles. But it was a wonderful place before they expanded Vermont and Figueroa to corridors, 4-lane freeways through their neighborhoods. What happened almost immediately? Property values plummeted. That's the number one thing that happened. Neighborhoods were destroyed, communities were separated from one another, which will happen with a 4-lane freeway cutting right through our neighborhood. Our neighborhood extends in the entire, it's not just Hope Ranch Annex, it's the entire area there. And where safety then becomes a huge concern about crossing that 4-lane freeway. Then what happens? Oh, okay, so all those empty lanes are full now. I mean, so 20 years of the neighborhood has been decimated by the construction. I mean, I don't know who around this table would like to pay for a home in which they can't access it except through a construction zone for 20 years. I'm sure I wouldn't. So, that right there. So then you have those 4 lanes that are appearing empty, now filled with traffic. But there's a problem, and it's the railroad bridge. So that's why you have the project split up into 3 projects. So you're going to build to the railroad bridge on one side, and then on the second thing is to build to the railroad bridge on the other side. Well, there's 4 lanes of traffic jammed in both directions by the railroad bridge. Why you would do that is, the only thing that I can surmise is that you're trying to force the railroad to expand that bridge area. In the meantime, our neighborhoods, so whether or not those lanes fill up with traffic by induced demand, which has been proven nationwide. It's not just East LA that was decimated by 4-lane corridors, otherwise known as freeways. It's nationwide, where I'm not sure why you don't look at the same information that's available to me. Nationwide, when they put in these expanded freeways, expanded corridors, it doesn't reduce the traffic, it just increases the traffic, but it does, in the interim, decimate every neighborhood that surrounds those expanded lane, quote-unquote, corridors. So, now the question becomes, if in 20 years, those lanes are, number one, are going to be filled as soon as they are constructed, because everybody's trying to avoid the 101. This is just, what this is just an extension of the 101. You're trying to, get the traffic off the 101, and whether you're trying to do it or not, the individual drivers will be escaping the 101, and they'll be coming into our neighborhood and our community. So then you've got 4 lanes of traffic just sitting there, like on the 101, spewing pollution, and making it ever more dangerous for us to walk on the sidewalk, to cross the street, and to be in our own neighborhoods. And furthermore, for 20 years, we can't get into our neighborhoods without going through a construction zone, like Hope Ranch Annex, where we live, where we have a home. There is no other access to that except Hollister. So So, and then you're creating this bottleneck. You're doing all of this with absolutely no guarantee from the railroad that you can actually widen that area. But you're just hoping that using us, you will force them to do it.
Could someone address the railroad crossing?
Actually, I'm going to address 3 points. The biggest challenge that we have on most projects, and especially controversial projects, is balancing the needs of all stakeholders. That's every time it's challenging. The alternative transportation group, for sure. The people who use the 25,000 people who are going to be using it. The residential users who are directly adjacent to the project. It's a difficult balance, and that's why we have these meetings. So, yes, projects progress. We try to incorporate improvements. But at the end, it's difficult to please everybody, and we understand that. But that's why we go through these steps. That's why we come to these meetings to try to accommodate as much as feasible. And that's a difficult challenge.
But I would suggest to you that that very few of the stakeholders, that the people driving the cars, are going to have their neighborhoods negatively impacted. They'll be just driving through our neighborhood. They're not going to see their housing value plummet. They're not going to see the pollution, the noise, the lack of safety in their neighborhoods. No, they're driving through our neighborhood to get to theirs. So I would say that, when you talk about stakeholders, there's categories of stakeholders.
Right.
Who has the most to lose? Who do you think has the most to lose? What stakeholder do you think has the most to lose? Their property value, their safety, their health, their pollution, their noise. Who do you think has the most to lose? Bikers? No, I don't think so.
So I'm going to address the other 2 questions that you had. So you talked about the railroad. So you talked about the volume. So what we showed in the volume is the section between San Antonio and Modoc. From San Antonio to Nogales is already at the level C service threshold, and it's at the design capacity right now. That was in 2011, so we're 5 years ahead of that. I'm sure the numbers have gone up since then. So that's part of the reason why we're doing from San Antonio to Modoc. The other part of that, let me finish and I'll hear you out for sure. The second part of that is we're looking, the railroad is going to require a lot of coordination. It's happened with the city of Santa Barbara doing the 101 project. It requires a lot of effort. We know that already, but we're confident it'll happen. The reason why we don't do that first is if we start the railroad right now and it takes 10 to 15 years, or 10 years, let's say, to start work on the railroad, we don't want to wait for the escalating cost on the San Antonio to Nogales to escalate while we're working on the railroad. So there's already a need from San Antonio to Nogales. It's already there. From Nogales to Modoc, it's already there. We could start those improvements and start coordination with the railroad. Otherwise, we're doing the railroad and then we're starting west of, the cost will probably go up 20, 30, 40%, much like the 101 did, back in the 90s till now. I mean, I don't know the increase in cost between that estimate and now, but it goes up fast, the cost. So we're planning to do the entire corridor. One section is already needed from a traffic circulation standpoint. Let's focus on that while in parallel we're working with the railroad to get that bridge replaced. As I said at the public meeting, that bridge, the abutments were built somewhere around 1915. I have a photo with Model A's going under there. The steel structure, somewhere in 1932, in the 1930s, they put that structure in. Take this project. Forget about Hollister Avenue widening, we still have to look at replacing that structure. Otherwise, Hollister, if that structure falls, collapses, or something happens, Hollister Avenue is shut down. Commerce is shut down, delivery service is shut down, emergency services is shut down. So that's part of the reason why we're looking to do Modoc to the west first. In summary, the lines are already there. 2, we're in parallel paths working with the railroad. We're not doing it to pressure the railroad. We just know how the process works. We're trying to do it in a cost-effective manner and to deal with the section of road that is already in capacity. State Street is currently under the level of service C, and it's below design capacity. It's projected to get there, but it's not there now.
So I don't, you haven't answered.
Excuse me, I think there were other hands up.
I know, but he hasn't answered my other
We'll have a chance to speak to Walter, I think, after, so if any points are not, or to any of these guys, but I do have some, there was Michael, I said, Michael, I'm sorry.
Well, since I too live in the annex and I'm a property owner, I think I should be a stakeholder. And I think it's always troubled me that there is that limited access to the corridor. And maybe I'm short-sighted, but I'm thinking of the last fire we had when the evacuation line, the mandatory was drawn right down. And how the hell am I going to get out of town if everybody else in my neighborhood is on that narrow little street? And I was scared, to be honest with you. And because I was sort of rethinking, should I pre-place my stuff outside of the area because I know it's going to get jammed on that day? And I think being in Santa Barbara, we're particularly vulnerable in emergencies like that. So I hope you can get the railroad too to expand that corridor, because to me, 2 lanes aren't enough. And I'll qualify by also saying I'm a bicyclist, and I'm very conscious of the needs of riding in that neighborhood as a bicyclist, which is probably why I take that little shortcut past the school.
Thank you. Okay, we have some hands here. Eve, has your concern been addressed? The other Eve?
Okay,
Yes?
yeah, no, what's some question? Okay, there you go with it.
And then Barry.
Okay. Just thank you so much for coming out and giving this presentation and bringing all of your staff, or not all your staff, but, a number of staff so you can kind of get to everyone's questions and all the details. I really appreciate that. I just wanted to ask, what is the existing speed limit on this stretch, and what's the sort of planned speed limit?
Yeah, I don't know if you know the existing speed limit, probably 40.
Yeah, 40 between San Antonio and Nogales.
Okay. So the way that the speed limits, and Gary might be better addressed, is I'm going to try and Gary will jump in. The way the speed limits are set in the future is once the corridor is open, they do what's called an 85th percentile survey speed. That sets the speed limit. Is that accurate?
Okay. And then what percentage design is the like site design at right now with your roadway configuration? Like 30 or 60?
No, a lot of it's been set by what. So when we can match the horizontal alignment, that means how many curves are in the road right now. Mm-hmm. Matching the existing horizontal alignment, the design speed is about 55 miles an hour. That doesn't mean that's what we put in. We're matching back what's there. So our shift in alignment is very minimal to what's there right now, both horizontally and vertically.
Oh no, I mean, how far along is your design? Like, is it at about 30 or 60%?
Yeah, so the first phase of the project, sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Okay.
Our first phase goes from Ahe to almost Nogales. And the primary purpose of that project is to replace the culvert underneath, next to the creekside, or what used to be the creekside. It's called the Tascadero Creek. We're looking to do that section first. That will put in the full improvements from Ahe to almost Nogales, and it's planned to go for summer of 2019.
Okay.
And it's currently at 65% complete.
Okay.
4 lanes between, 2 lanes between 1.
No, it's essentially that right now. The road is very wide prior to the railroad. It would, the interim would stay similar to what it is right now. That right lane as you're heading eastbound would continue to be a right lane, and the through lane would continue to be a through lane.
Okay, I just wanted to follow up on this question.
Sure.
So, in terms of the bike lanes, I'm really pleased to see that you guys can fit a 2-foot buffer, and I think that that's definitely a step forward from the standard, 5-foot bike lane or just typical Class 2 bike lane. But I think that the direction that you see bicycle lanes going, especially as we project, like, as this project is looking at the future, 2035 traffic volumes. I'm curious if the county's considered putting physical, like, bollards in that buffer and taking it from class 2 to class 4 protected bike lane. The city of Santa Barbara is planning on putting that, a protected bike lane on Coda this summer, and Goleta's doing a small one on Kyriel. So I think as we kind of look towards, like, what are our roads going to look like in the future, especially with the 40 mile per hour speed, I'd love to see the county consider a protected bike lane here.
You and the Bike Coalition have been very helpful in the past in helping us stay abreast of best practices out there with striping and protected bike lanes, et cetera. So one place that we're looking at doing a class 4, or like a cycle track, would be on the mountainside of State Street between 154 and the Railroad Bridge. And the reason why that works is there's no driveways. There's nothing that needs to cross it. Perfect place. We don't know exactly what the design looks like, but that's an area that we're looking hard at trying to do some sort of barrier separated or grade separated facility there. It gets, and then flipping over to where we've already experimented with buffered class 2s and we've had good reaction, is over in the sort of Patterson Turnpike area on Hollister. We've got a buffer out there now. Maybe someday we might consider something that would be upgraded and a little bit more protective. But the problem, and the reason why you can consider that is it's basically just one big long sound wall and a sidewalk. Where it gets a lot more complicated, but I challenge you to help us with the design, is once you get into the area between Nogal and Modoc, there's a left turn lane. There's people who got to access their homes and businesses. You've got to keep access open to that area. There's a lot of driveways that flow in and out of there. And so, to me, I can't see how you'd make it work.
Okay, well, thanks for considering it. I would just say that as like an overarching comment on the second
And
one.
can I just add?
There were other hands up, I think.
We can always add that too, as long as it's not changing the right-of-way width. We have that ability. It's a pretty simple add to the plans, and we have, I think, 7 to 8 feet right now for the bike facility out there. So to add that later on, we have
Just go
time.
along.
Okay, and I know everyone else has comments, but as an overarching kind of comment, I would be interested in seeing MTD collaborate with the county and the city on some sort of like bus BRT or like bus rapid transit line, because this is such a key corridor in our community, and it's such almost like a straight thoroughfare.
And I'll just touch on that right, and Jordan would attest to this. We have been in a lot of coordination with MTD as we move forward, so if you can communicate those desires to either MTD or the county, we will hear about it one way. So yeah, just communicate with them or us.
We have other hands up. I think Alex, I'm sorry, Alex?
Yeah, I have 2 questions.
And then Bill.
I was a little bit curious about the level of service analysis. I thought that we were looking at BMTs, vehicle mileage travels, and consigo analysis, and how come we went back to the 90s with that? First question. Second, what have you done in your designs to lower the 85 percentile speed? Have you thought of landscaping, the geometrics, maybe eliminating the turning lane in some places? Or what? Those 2 questions, please.
The VMT, so I think it was Assembly Bill 365, something like that, a couple of years ago, made it possible for developments, or trying to open the door for developments to come into areas and not have to do the traditional trip generation and level of service and mitigations that way, so you can get some developments coming in basically for almost free to come in and develop in the downtown area. And it's still being worked out, but that VMT is primarily just for fees and developments. And it's not really being used for analysis of how the intersections are operating as far as public works looks at it. We still need to look at level of service. Is it an A, B, C, D, E, or F? And if it drops down below the a certain level, you gotta come up with a plan and, start looking for money to fix it. The second question was in the, along the whole corridor and have it look nice and try to slow people down.
Yeah, Alex,
That
that's,
is a thought that we have in the back of our mind with all of our designs.
that's where we need people's help to get the design right, because as an architect, that it's a combination of the details that makes the facility work either better or worse. And so, when we start to look at these plans and you look at, say, for example, colored crosswalk enhancements, where have we been able to adjust curve radiuses so that people have these sweeping curves that they can go around more quickly. I was fascinated to learn that when the engineers looked at some of the curve radiuses around the existing businesses, somebody did it right. They're pretty tight turns. And so, for example, when you're coming out of Nogale onto Hollister, it's a pretty tight turn radius. So in places where it wasn't, we tried to make the adjustments. In places where they got it right, we left that. But there's other details, like the landscaping, like the crosswalk enhancements, that can combine to making it a totally different driving experience than when you're out on Hollister, say out by San Marcos High School. That's our challenge.
And I'd add that the purpose of the last workshop we did was to focus on the streetscape components. Tom, can you pull up the slide on streetscape? I mean, some components of the project have been reviewed by the board, and the board has authorized environmental review of that component, like the widening. But what we're really trying to focus on in part right now is what streetscape components do we want to integrate into this. So planning and development in conjunction with Public Works has been working up these plans over the last 6 months or so. So what we're trying to figure out is what about landscaping? What about lighting? What about sidewalks, crosswalks, bike lanes, bus stop shelters? We've already met with MTD several times and talked about shelters, improvements for bus stops, signage, making this more of a cohesive corridor through landscaping and other components so that it's distinguished, it serves as a real amenity to the community, a gateway into Eastern Valley. So we have opportunities that would not only serve to make it a safer corridor for bicyclists and pedestrians, but also to integrate it into the community. When we had our last workshop, clearly the community was very concerned about the number of lanes. But we're going to continue working on the landscaping, and that's something that we want to try and actually put together with public input over the next couple of months so it can be fully integrated into the project. So we are coming to the county South Board of Architectural Review first week of July to get the second round of input from them on the project. We're going to conduct another workshop. This time we hope to, again, get people focused on the landscaping, even though we know that the widening component is a concern to many people. But I think that they go hand in hand, and there are some real opportunities, and we're looking for that input. These plans illustrate some proposals that staff come up with, but we really need public input on what's appropriate for this community. How can we make this really fit into the community in a way that's more acceptable rather than just having a road widening project.
Thank you. So I think we're getting close and running out of time.